Well, hello and welcome to this week's Countrysides podcast, brought to you by NFU Mutual, and rabbits and trees and plants and vegetables.
And apples, Simon.
Yes.
Yeah, I took a super trip out, and I love going out to Wills and Charlotte's at Linyig to see how their enterprise is developing, because it was brand new. Who would ever have thought of calling an enterprise the Apple Orphanage?
And it's funny how you remember when we were kids, we used to have them sort of big clay crock pots. You know, they were quite big, weren't they? And they used to have them in the glory hole, we used to call it. People probably got a different slant on it now.
Every farmhouse has got a glory hole.
They have, haven't they? And there was a little thing called, well, it was a thing under the stairs, and we used to have this thing with the crock pots in, and there was all sorts of sort of vegetables and fruits and all hidden in them to preserve them.
Strange, my father used to tell me of how they stored their apples, which was in the haystack, which was very, very dry, kept them, and they were absolutely marvellous. And he said you would be reminded that they were there when you could smell the apples coming out of the hay, and you'd go and retrieve them then.
Well, look at the butts of spuds that were in the sheds.
They did.
Everyone just covered them up with some hay or straw, didn't they?
Yeah, that's exactly right, yeah. So, it was a good enterprise.
Yeah, and also I was at the Sulby Horticultural Society show there, another good turnout, and lots of people and lots of youngsters involved, which was good.
Simon, the shows now have this added attraction of the rivalry of pumpkin growers. You must have met some of them sometime.
Oh, it's like anything though, isn't it? The leeks and the potatoes all the same size, and they're particularly, as you're hearing there, about the gentleman's Victoria's sandwich sponge cake made by the gentleman. It's a big rivalry in that one.
You go around the show, Simon, as I do. Do you think there's as much rivalry now as there used to be?
Possibly not. I think it was probably, I suppose in them days, the vegetable growing was such an important part of everybody's life, where now people can just get them from
It was
anywhere
very, very serious at one
leisure.
time. But it's a very good community effort, though, Simon, isn't it? It brings a lot of people off the village and the district, and people tend to come from all over the island to support the shows.
Yes, they do.
And I know the organisers have to be very careful that they don't change their dates, because that throws everything out of gear.
Not allowed to do things like that. But on a more serious note, I spoke to Stuart Jakes, the Isle of Man Government's Chief Veterinary Officer, about what seems to be a resurgence in the rabbit disease Myxomatosis.
It does seem to come and go, Simon, doesn't it? And you'll spot one on your farm, and you'll see, and then the rabbit will disappear for a while, and you think no more about it. And they'll come back again, and it comes again. It's strange how it does come in waves like that.
Yeah, and Stuart will explain a little bit more about that as you'll hear in a minute. But also the worry that's been over the past year or so about the Isle of Man's plantations. You will find out more about that, John.
Well, that's right, Simon. And I know I was particularly disappointed to learn that there's going to be such clear felling that it might affect the backdrop to St John's Village, which is on Gobnabenya, which is as you look southwest from St John's. And I was disappointed that would disappear. But when I talked to Robin Sadler, he had a whole new slant on it. And I'm not dreading it so much now as I was.
Well, let's find out more about those subjects in more detail in this week's Countryside.
I went out on the Ramsey Road out of Peel to Linyig to visit the Apple Orphanage, run there by Will Folds and Charlotte Traynor, to see how their new adventure, well, not so new now, is developing.
Very well. We're always trying new things. So we're always in the infancy of something, I think. But we're really pleased with where we've come to, and the response and the support of people bringing us their fruit has been fantastic.
Do they still bring you their fruit?
Yes, yeah. We've got our kind of die-hard regulars, but we also pick up a couple of new people each year, which is fantastic. And now that we're expanding into other fruits, we're doing the rhubarb and the gooseberry. So we're meeting new people all the time.
And are the fruits you're getting now what people would naturally grow anyway, or are they growing specially for you now?
We're just verging on the special, especially for us. At the moment, it is all things that people have surplus that they would have had anyway. But we've actually got two farmers which we're talking to about kind of growing us contract crops for scaling up, which is quite exciting. So that's something we've been working on for a little while, but we're just about there now.
And do you use all traditional fruits, local, or do you sort of experiment with some more exotic varieties?
We are very committed to the locally grown aspect, but we're quite happy to look at growing some more unusual varieties over here. Some of the ones that we've put into the orchard recently are pretty unusual, and I'm pretty confident in saying that we're the only people on the island growing them. Apple varieties such as the Pitmaston pineapple, or the Bloody Ploughman, or Pendragon. These are all actually heritage, but very unusual.
Are you interested then in heritage in the traditional varieties?
Yeah, we haven't made a kind of an exclusive decision to that, but what we're interested in is taste, and a lot of the more modern varieties are, in our view, overly concerned with appearance, and that doesn't always follow through to a good flavour. So wherever we find a good flavour, that's where we're interested.
Charlotte, if I can come to you now then. When the product is produced and made and bottled, how do you market it? Do you have to market it very, very vigorously, or do you just offer it?
To be honest, we're still just about at the point where the demand is a little bit more than we can supply, I would say. So at the moment, we're in the really fortunate position where we don't have to do an awful lot of marketing. It's fantastic for us to use things like social media to tell people about the process and about why we make certain decisions, and a little bit just about how we make everything, which is fantastic. But we do that more for an informative point of view rather than marketing, really. But hopefully this year we're really trying to make a little bit of a progression this year to scale up in terms of the volume that we produce, but also in the array of flavours and drinks that we're making. But no, we're finding more and more that as we go to the agricultural shows and festivals, that people will come straight over and already understand a bit about what we make and the concept behind the fruit exchange, which is fantastic. But even so, we're finding a huge amount of people anyway that haven't got a clue what we do. So it's really nice that we can get out to market at festivals and shows and talk to new people about what we do, and expand the market a little bit more.
So there's still fresh ground out there to break?
Absolutely. You know, we've spoken to a huge amount of people this year already who didn't know anything about the fruit exchange, and either thinking about bringing us apples in apple season or have brought us rhubarb and gooseberries for the last month or so. I think we've definitely had a record number of rhubarb and gooseberry fruit exchanges this year.
Well, if I can come back to you then, since you started, has the process changed, the method that you use now to produce this super drink that you have?
The basics of the process have stayed very similar, but I think I would be safe to say that week to week we tweak everything so that we can get it slightly more efficient, and we're always trying to look at any change that we can make to save our backs, or save a couple of pennies that we can pass on to our wholesalers as well. But in general, I mean, we are very much about the fruit, so we don't ever kind of play with how the kind of the fruit content is dealt with, but the specifics of what particular piece of equipment we use, that's always varying a little bit. And we've actually started to develop a couple of pieces of equipment just for our own purposes, because some of the commercially available equipment was slightly out of our price range.
There, Charlotte and Will, very, very enthusiastic and developing that remarkable industry, really, cottage industry of fruit juice, and the exciting things they're bringing out, Simon, is really quite good.
Yeah, and it's just such a fresh taste, isn't it, of them naturally squeezed ones, isn't it?
Well, they are really, and they're a bright couple, you know, and who would ever have thought of calling a firm the Apple Orphanage to start with? And it's an eye-catcher, or whatever you like to call it.
No, you just get this vision, though, of people bringing apples in and going, can you look after this for me for a few months?
And that's exactly how it works.
It is. People bring them in, don't they?
They do.
They do. Good, and wish them well with that venture. Well, lots of rabbits have been spotted on the Isle of Man recently, not moving and very slow. And it's usually caused by a disease that affects rabbits called Myxomatosis. To tell me more about it and how prevalent it is at this particular time of the year, I spoke to the Chief Veterinary Officer for the Isle of Man Government, Stuart Jakes.
It depends which parish you're in as to whether you spot them or not, because it moves around the island. You see some rabbits for a while and then you don't. And many people say, well, how does that happen? And my view would be it completely matches the science, and it is completely normal. The way in which disease spreads is I think, perfectly characterised by myxomatosis.
We say about it coming and going. Is that one of the things about the disease? Because I know the speculators and people like that will think, do the Isle of Man government introduce myxomatosis to keep the rabbit population down?
Ah, my special black rabbit breeding program, yes. Well, no, we haven't got any black rabbits or rabbits of any other colour. And the more technical explanation, which I'll try and put in more simple terms as to why this happens, is all down to immunity and numbers. Because myxomatosis is spread by close association with another rabbit or with the fleas that can transfer it from one rabbit to another. And when we first saw it in the early 50s, it basically killed about 95% of all known rabbits very, very quickly because they had no immunity. And over the years since then, a lot of rabbits have become immune to it genetically, so they've developed and they've effectively evolved, and others have lived above ground, and that also reduced the number of fleas that they got, which meant the transmission dropped. So now you've got a lot of rabbits that really never ever get it, but as the population grows, you get more and more and more rabbits, they meet each other more frequently. And so if you get one with myxomatosis, instead of meeting one or maybe even no other rabbits, it meets 10, 15 or 20. And in that 10, 15 or 20, there'll be 2 or 3 that are susceptible. So they'll get it and they'll meet a lot more rabbits because there's loads of them around. But you can imagine that after a couple of weeks, when this has all happened, all the rabbits that are susceptible have died and got it. The ones that will never catch it are still there. So myxomatosis seems to disappear. There'll be rabbits there that don't get it. All the ones that have got it have died, so it vanishes. And it's just in the odd rabbit that you don't see, and that happens for another few months, and then it just happens again. You get more rabbits, the population grows, there's more that can catch it, and they meet each other, they pass disease. That's why it seems to come and go.
See, it's a strange sort of phenomenon when you explain it in a scientific way like that. And does this happen with many other diseases or types of animal, this type of disease?
This is the normal way of things. It really is. I mean, when we think back to human diseases, I mean, measles, whooping cough, all the childhood things, we never had them all the time. You always had outbreaks and epidemics. And the reason why we don't see those or see them very rarely now is we vaccinate people. So they're not genetically immune like some rabbits are to myxomatosis, but they're vaccinated, or lots of people are vaccinated. So if anybody does catch measles, they have very few people to pass it to because they're all vaccinated. So you get one person and the disease hopefully resolves and nothing happens. But if nobody was vaccinated, you'd see exactly the same thing.
Is it restricted to just rabbits? I mean, if people have got pets and they see wild rabbits in their garden, are they at risk?
Myxomatosis is a disease of rabbits, as is the other nasty rabbit disease, which is a viral hemorrhagic disease. It only passes from rabbit to rabbit, but it will affect pet rabbits, and there is a vaccine for pet rabbits for both of the nasty rabbit diseases. So if you have pet rabbits, you've got wild rabbits in your garden, or you encounter wild rabbits in any other way, then you should vaccinate your pet.
The Isle of Man rabbit population, is it a concern? I know farmers moan that they're eating carrots and seeds on the sides, but apart from that, not much harm or disease spreading?
In terms of are rabbits themselves a concern for disease amongst rabbits? Well, not really. They're actually quite a good food source if you wanted to go out and get some for yourself, if you're a farmer. But they do eat an awful lot. I think from memory, the numbers are 10 rabbits equals 1 sheep, which when you think about that, means that if you have a lot of rabbits in your field, they are eating a lot of the grass that you would otherwise have fed to your sheep. So, reducing or controlling the numbers probably is quite a good idea, in a proper and humane way. In terms of other diseases, there actually is a close linkage or a known linkage between rabbits and Johne's disease, which is a long-term chronic wasting disease of cattle. So there is a connection. But I wouldn't think that anybody has got, and I certainly haven't got any kind of concept that we're going to try and control the rabbit population in order to control Johne's, because I think it would be singularly pointless to try and do that.
Chief Veterinary Officer for the Isle of Man Government, Stuart Jakes, telling us about the horrible disease myxomatosis that affects rabbits, John, and It's one of the things, we all see it on farms, don't we, and see the suffering.
Yes, we do, Simon, and nobody wants to see an animal suffer, farmers or anybody else. It's not a nice thing to happen to any species at all.
Manx Radio's Countryside is brought to you by NFU Mutual.
Well, I don't know how you felt about the onset of the larch disease that threatens to clear all the Manx plantations out. I know I was particularly disappointed to think that whole side of Slewellian, which is the backdrop for St John's Village, would eventually disappear. But when I talked to Robin Sadler, himself an arborist, he put a whole different construction on the clearing of the island's plantations.
What we've got to think of, John, I think, is that the whole idea of this modern forestry, this commercial forestry, grew out of the First World War with a forestry commission in the United Kingdom. There'd been such a demand for pit props, which couldn't be imported because of the blockade, submarine, and tremendous demand for timber for the trenches. The vast amounts of trees were clear felled in Scotland, Wales, and throughout England. Devastation, really. The first thought at the end of the war was, what are we going to do if this all happens again? So the Forestry Commission grew out of growing commercial, quick-growing coniferous timber, pit props in mind, and possibility for other emergency purposes. By the time we got to the sort of late 40s, early 50s, people were realising that we weren't going to have another trench war, that the mining was on the way out, what we were going to do with all these trees. And of course, after a lot of reports by learned people, the obvious thing came, well, let's treat it as an amenity asset to the country. You know, I mean, it might not have immediate monetary supply, but we are enhancing the countryside, making the country more attractive, probably to visitors. The tendency was to go very much for broadleaves. A lot of the broadleaves don't grow into what you would call commercially viable timber, except for some very traditional industries like sort of charcoal, for hazel sticks, fencing, that kind of thing. But nevertheless, these will have their place. But the thing that always springs to mind is oak. And in the question of the Isle of Man, at one time there were large oak forests in the Isle of Man, native oak. And it's always been said that forest, woodlands, went right virtually to the top of Snay Fell, albeit they were tiny wind-blasted willows, Arctic willows. It was covered in forest. And of course it was the coming in the Neolithic age when people started keeping animals and cultivating rather than going hunting and gathering, that obviously the immediate effect was over a very, when I say not immediate, but relatively immediate effect was that all the trees, as they were taken away, were not replaced because the natural regeneration was eaten off by goats and sheep and what have you. And nobody at that time was really considering it worth their while to spend time establishing and protecting new plantations. So the chances here now, I would think, although we've always got this risk of this continuous procession of new diseases, with all the movement that goes on of nursery stock and plants in general, we're always at the risk of new fungi, new viruses and things appearing and causing devastation like it has. But we've got to sort of think of a lot more variety in our forests. So thinking of oak, that's obviously going to be one which is a very long-term thing, but nevertheless a tremendously enhancing sort of woodland. We've got to think of hazel and possibly beech and things like that.
So in fact, the Phytophora might have presented us with an opportunity to change direction,
well,
perhaps.
It has. I think it's a thing that was coming because a lot of our coniferous woods were planted here. It wasn't so much, I don't think, a strategic reserve of timber like the Forestry Commission in the United Kingdom. It was very much, and I hope, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, was a work creation scheme.
Yes.
With it didn't come the sort of much, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, expertise in choice of species, choice of site. It was very often a matter of a lorry load of trees and a party of men who were perhaps not particularly interested being sent up a hillside to put these trees in every 5 feet until you reach the top.
Do you think we'll see a variety of planting then? If it's down to individual organisations, perhaps?
I think it will. I mean, there might be a lot of people stamping their own personality on what's being planted, but, you know, they will have to think about where they're planting, and a lot of people are very knowledgeable about this, about site, about exposure, altitude, soil conditions, soil type. You know, it's all really very important, this.
Will we need an overall plan, Robin, do you think?
Well, yeah, I think there are some. I mean, the Ramsey Forest is an example, and there's quite a comprehensive plan out about that, which has been around for a few years. The idea is to sort of link this up through the town, and the idea is that where you're talking of nature conservation and encouragement of wildlife, you want continuous forests, even if it only means a little bridge from one large forest to another.
Not all doom and gloom, not all negative.
No.
Some wonderful opportunities,
yes.
And we'll watch to see them grow.
Yeah, well, I think we've got to look forward with great optimism here. Whenever I plant a tree, it just gives me a tremendous buzz.
Well, there, Robin Sadler with a very positive view and quite an exciting view, something I'd never thought of before, but I'll take it for my own comfort, Simon.
It's not all the plantations are made completely of large trees, though, are they?
No, they're not, but I do believe that Slough Albion particularly is going to be affected. But Robin's idea of what we might now plant it with, which might be even better than what's there already.
Yeah, plenty of speed on the barrels with the witches. You can go down the hill if there's no trees.
They might start again, Simon.
Indeed. Well, lastly on this week's programme, it was the 69th annual Sulby Horticultural Society show, and I went along and spoke to some of the people, successful or just there on the day. So let's talk to the junior winner of the show, and Isaac Hope. Congratulations. Fine big rosette on your picture there. Tell everyone what your picture is.
Derby coastline.
You've done a picture of a boat there out in quite a rough sea. To do it, what did you have? Just normal paints?
Yeah.
How long did it take you to make?
About a morning.
What made you put the fishing boat in? Is that what you see when you're out on the Derby seaside?
Yeah.
Yes, my name is Tibor Miklos.
Congratulations, first of all. Best
very
in
much.
show. Is that a
Yeah.
first for you?
It is a first, yes. I'm not actually used to entering horticultural shows, but obviously we're entering as Milne Town, so it's really a team effort for the whole group.
Well, you seem to have been lumbered with the spokesman job for it, but
Yes, it
apparently it was
sounds like
you that sort of picked this display out.
That's right. Yes, I did go around the garden, and I did look out for plants that sort of jump out at you, things that you think this is really show worthy, and the crocosmias are at the moment in season. And obviously we've got quite a few choice cultivars, and so it's kind of an easy job, but the plants made it easy for me to just go out and pick the best ones. Yeah.
The fantastic thing about it to me was that, walking down the country lanes all my life and used to pick an odd dandelion, a daisy and put them together. And that reminds me of that sort of way it is really, just sort of as if you've walked through the estate and gone, I'll take that one. And none of the big fancy range, and they've just gone together well.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I do have a background in design, so I suppose I have an eye for colour, and I like to keep it simple as well. So I think last year I entered 12 different blooms, and this year I thought, no, I'm going to keep it down to only a handful of different plants, and just try and make something tasteful with them, you see. So perhaps that's why you find it similar to or reminiscent of white plants, because of the astilbes looking at a sort of frothy feel, whereas other things like the crocosmias have these sort of spikes that stick out of those, like in a sort of field-esque situation.
Well, Chairman of the Sulby Horticultural Show Committee, Ewan Quain, congratulations. It's a very successful show today.
Yes, it was. It was absolutely amazing to see how many entries we had. I think it was somewhere around about 1,150 entries, of which 45% around about were all junior or children's entries. And it was absolutely amazing to see all the colour and everything throughout the show.
When you look around here and the wonderful vegetables on the display and the flowers, photography, cakes, handicraft, jams and curds, there is everything, and there's such a variety. And I suppose when people go round, they don't get the chance to see half of these things at anywhere else but these shows.
That's quite true. As a show, we try to involve as many people as we can, and if we can, and if people suggest a class we think might do well, we will actually include it. unfortunately, we're now getting a little bit restricted in space, so it's a little bit more difficult to introduce new classes. But the show itself was dying away a few years ago, and to see it pick up like it has again now, it's fantastic. It really is good.
Well, what's the secret of that? I mean, people, I suppose, have always grown vegetables and everything all their lives, and maybe exhibited them occasionally in their time. But nowadays, there doesn't seem too much rivalry in it. People are just proud in a way to show what they can do.
Yes, I think it's a bit of the personal touch, and using the electronic web systems to put ourselves out there. Actually going to speak to people on the allotments and things like that, and encouraging them to put in, because a lot of people do think there's a lot of rivalry out there, but once they've been and realise it's a friendly show and there's no real rivalry and nearly a trophy for everybody, then it's great. You know, they all come along and support us very well.
Well, Secretary Kirsty Martin, another successful show, and all those wonderful cups that were on display. How many of them?
69 trophies in total.
But they look brand new, most of them.
Yes, the week before show, there's a lot of cleaning that happens.
But them trophies, it's not just the prize of winning whatever section they've won. It's the nostalgia and the names that are on some of them cups from years gone by.
Absolutely. Over the last year, we've done a piece of work where we've actually looked at all the trophies, and we've got all the results from all the years ago, and we're pulling together a little book for the Sulby Horticultural Show, the sort of historical trophy position. So it'll be really nice. There's a lot more work to be done on it yet, but it'll be really nice when that all comes together and we have a picture of who had the trophy, when, and for how long.
And that's one of the things I suppose other shows have lost over the years, where they've been given trophies out from famous names that were part of the show from its beginning, really. And nowadays, you know, that them same cups are getting presented, which is nice because the memory stays there.
Absolutely, and the nostalgia and the sort of interest in terms of that heritage position with the show. With our 70th show next year, it is incredibly important to us. So we're planning on doing something as equally good as today's been, but you know, something slightly different for the 70th year.
Some of the people at a very successful 69th annual Sulby Horticultural Society show, and another event that wouldn't be the same in a big massive hall, John, would they, them sort of thing?
They're essentially village do's, Simon, and the rivalry between competitors and growers is marked. And I know the pumpkin growers, don't know if you have any pumpkins in Sulby or not, but the pumpkin growers are great rivals.
Yes, you'll have to climb in some of them, can't you?
Headed up by some of the leading personalities on the Isle of Man.
Manx Radio's Countryside is brought to you by NFU Mutual.
Well, there you are, a very varied selection on this week's Countryside, from rabbits to fruit to vegetables to trees and apples, and it's good, John, and of course it puts us in good stead for the Royal Manx show.
It does, Simon,
after a very successful
yes,
southern.
so we'll be bringing reports of that in due course.
So that's it for this week's Countryside, and we'll be back next week with more.